Welcome back to Washington Watch. Joseph back home in for Tony today. It's been less than 2 days since the draft of the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill was released, and we're still digging through its 2,702 pages. But a number of Senate Republicans are already raising alarms for a number of reasons. Joining me now to talk about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and what the problems are with it is U.S. Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri. Senator Hawley, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thanks for having me.
Well, my first question for you, why is there social experimentation in the infrastructure bill?
It's a great question. I think the answer is that this bill isn't about infrastructure. This is about the woke politics of the left. And this bill is part of their woke left-wing social agenda. You see it with this gender identity language that is in this bill. You see it with the Green New Deal that is in this bill. You see it with their quotas for this, that, and the other that's in this bill. So this is really about their woke left-wing agenda. It's about forcing that agenda on the American people. That's why Joe Biden is so enthusiastic about it, and it's why I'm opposing it.
Are there components of this infrastructure bill? Because again, most of us, when we think infrastructure, we think roads and highways, we think the parts of government that we're supposed to agree on, right? There are some things government should do. They should help us build highways. And when we think infrastructure, that's what we think about. Are there things about this bill that there would be general agreement upon, but for the social policy?
Well, you would think that if this bill were actually just to focus on roads and bridges, waterways in my state, the state of Missouri, that would be something that we could agree on. But that's not what this bill is. And that's why I say I don't think it really is an infrastructure bill. It's been hijacked by the left to become a left-wing woke social project. And it's fueled and funded by pork barrel spending. So what you have is a bill that's going to cost over $1 trillion for the working people of this country. And what's it funding? It's funding gender identity projects. Literally, that's in the bill. What's it funding? It's funding getting rid of every school bus in America and replacing it with electric vehicles. It's funding other elements of the Green New Deal across the country. I mean, that's the priorities. Those are the priorities of this bill. And that's why I'm going to vote no, and I hope that every Republican does.
Now, this is a big bill. It's 2,700 pages. I would understand if you hadn't digested every word of this. But how exactly are they trying to integrate gender identity into what they still are calling an infrastructure bill?
Yeah, the great part about that is it's in the section about digital infrastructure, so about broadband. And that just shows you that the Democrats here and the White House, who are the principal drafters of this bill, are willing to hijack any and every portion of it. So in the section ostensibly about digital infrastructure, broadband, there's gender identity language, there's gender identity tracking that goes on here, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, this bill is chock full of woke left-wing projects in every title of the bill and every aspect of the bill. And I guess it shouldn't come as a surprise because, again, Joe Biden and his team negotiated it. Biden is all for it, and it enacts his left-wing agenda.
And I do think it's interesting how much, and we talk about gender identity, I don't know how broadband necessarily would be transphobic. I don't even know if that's the allegation, but it is strange that that Biden, being the generation that he is in, has taken this gender issue and made it such a passion project of his as he apparently has. Now, you joined 6 other Republican senators in a statement where you referred to this essentially as a liberal wish list. What other things, in addition to the gender identity component of this bill, trouble you most?
Well, I mean, take the Green New Deal elements that are in the bill. I mean, all kinds of investments in Green New Deal projects, climate change projects. Then there's money spent here to tear down racist highways, quote unquote. Who knew that highways could be racist, but apparently they are. So this bill, again, is chock full of the Democrats' agenda. It is chock full of their CRT, their critical race theory agenda, in terms of what is inspiring their policies here and the rhetoric behind it. It's chock full of their social agenda. It's chock full of the Green New Deal agenda, and it's all paid for with pork barrel spending. I mean, this is going to be over $1 trillion in spending, and they're just warming up because Part 2 is coming next week, where they want to spend another $3 trillion. So it is leftist politics fueled by pork barrel spending.
Now, on that point about spending, your colleague Senator Lee from Utah has taken on the spending component of this pretty directly. And you mentioned the fact that this is 1 trillion, but next week we got 3 trillion, and not to mention the other trillions that have been spent in an emergency context, allegedly over the last year and a half because of COVID. Why is it that so few people seem to be concerned about how much money we're spending in Washington, D.C. anymore?
Well, probably because a lot of people don't know about it. But I think if they knew what we were spending it on, or more exactly what Congress is spending it on, the White House, they would be stunned. And that's why I think it's so important to do the kind of reporting that you're doing. It's why it's important to read these bills, by the way, because you wouldn't know any of this based on the press releases from the White House or from people who are in support of this bill. But if you actually take the time to read the 2,700 pages, what you'll find is that this is a woke left-wing bill, and that the spending is really in service to that agenda. And that's just not something that I can support. I think we can do so much better than this. I mean, the bottom line is this is totally the wrong agenda for the country. What the country needs to be focused on is rebuilding our economy, getting working class jobs back in this country, getting this economy growing again, getting inflation down so that people can actually afford to put food on the table, for heaven's sake. That's not what this does. This doesn't do any of it. This just pursues the Democrats' leftist agenda.
Now, this bill, all the headlines about it referred to it as the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and it's just kind of become unofficially part of the title. But you're raising these concerns. What's your sense of the Republicans in your caucus? Are your concerns shared? Is there going to be widespread or even unanimous opposition to this when it finally comes up for a vote?
Well, I sure hope so. I sure hope that any Republican who is worried about the leftist agenda of the Democrat Party, the hard left woke agenda, their cultural social agenda, will say no to this bill. I'd hope that would be every Republican. I would hope that anybody who's concerned about massive pork barrel spending in service of this kind of woke politics would say no to this bill. So we'll see. I don't know what the final vote would be. I just think it's so important to get the facts out there and to let people know what's really in this bill and to say we can do so much better than this. And I hope that Republicans will rally and take a stand and say no to the Biden agenda and yes to a better agenda for the American people.
Senator Josh Hawley, thank you so much for taking your time, and thanks for your standing for what is good and true in the Capitol. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And we will continue to track this story. Is it a Trojan horse? I mean, it sure looks like it, which is why it's going to be interesting to see what kind of opposition can be generated in the Senate. Now, stay with us. Coming up, vaccine passports are coming to New York City. What does this mean for the people there? We'll talk about it after the break. Stay with us.